Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, Identity and Influence.
Yeah.
I'm your host, Mo, and as always, I am sitting here with Dr. Lemusita.
Yes, what's going on, Mo? It's always great to be with you. Always a good time. Looking forward to our conversation today.
On today's podcast, we're going to dive into leadership lessons that shape the way that we lead and influence others. Today's topic is an important one: leadership and criticism.
Yes.
If you're in leadership in any capacity, you're going to face criticism. It's a part of the job. The question is, how are you going to handle it? And how we use and strengthen our leadership rather than letting it tear us down is really what we need to focus on. And that's what we're diving in today. So, Dr. Lem, let's get right to it. Why don't you tell our listeners why you wrote this one?
When you are in leadership, you're just going to face criticism. It's just going to come. When I started writing these leadership lessons was my first executive role. I was vice president for student life. And this is when I started writing some of these lessons down. And, like as a youth pastor, everyone liked you. I always before then had opportunities, to do some cool things and some fun things. And there was leadership in youth ministry, but it wasn't like being vice president for student life at college. I mean, there was a lot bigger money. There were a lot more direct reports and, a lot more layers to it. And, you quickly learn that you just can't make everybody happy.
Let's start with the foundation. Why do you think criticism is so closely tied to leadership? And can a leader avoid criticism?
Well, I think leadership and criticism just go hand in hand. Like I said, you can't make everybody happy. And part of leadership is to experience criticism, because if you're leading, especially as an administrator, I realized as a vice president for student life, I wasn't the president of the college, but I was administrating for someone above me. Even the president had a board and he was administrating for somebody above them. So many times you become like the mouthpiece of leadership, because this is what I am instructed to do. And so a lot of times, especially in that vice president role, I had to just carry out what leadership expected, and it wasn't always popular. And, that's just kind of the sad reality. When you are an administrator for someone, when you're working for someone, sometimes you just have to, pass things and do things because that's how you're instructed to do so. And so, you're not going to make everybody happy, and criticism will come. I think so. If part of leadership is to experience criticism, I think the other part of leadership is to have the wisdom to know which kind of criticism and which voices to listen to. And so there are some people that are just going to be haters, and that's okay. It's just part of life. But then there are people that will come give pretty good constructive criticism, and we need to heed their wisdom and listen to that. And and you just ask, can it be avoided? If you're leading, I don't think it can be avoided. If you're working with people, it can't be avoided.
A lot of leaders see criticism as negative. How can leaders shift their mindset, shift their perspective to view criticism as a tool for growth rather than an attack on who they are?
Yeah. If you're not being criticized and you're not making moves, you're not making a difference. I think it's only a negative thing for the person criticizing. And if you allow it to impact you, the criticism is a mirror. It allows us to look at something and learn something about the situation, about yourself. I do want to highlight that, sometimes criticism can be an attack. And I think the wisdom, like I was saying earlier, will be to know whether you should let it have an impact on you or not.
You mentioned in this article that criticism often says more about the critic, as you just said.
Yeah.
So how can leaders use this perspective to their advantage when they receive that kind of feedback?
It's a mirror. Criticism is coming when it comes from someone. It might even come from yourself, right? That level of trust that you have in that other person giving that criticism is going to be the differentiator. I think that's how you are going to determine whether you'll receive it as good feedback and grow from it, or if there's no trust there. And if there's no relationship there, then, just let like water running off your back, man. No big deal. I think also receiving criticism allows you to grow some thick skin, especially in leadership. If you're going to lead, it's just going to happen. And so get used to it and get comfortable with it because that's just the part of leadership.
There are a lot of haters out there. Some people just like to grumble because they want to
Yeah,
grumble. So
that's
how can
true.
leaders discern between criticism and something that's more impactful to our leadership?
I mean, yeah, it's a great question. I've been on the receiving end of both, and I think that the leader gets to decide at the end of the day. You need to tie it, whatever the criticism is, back to vision. Does it help you get to where we're going? If the criticism helps me and helps the organization get to fulfill the vision, to get to where we're going, like let's use it, let's do it. But does the criticism hinder me from getting to vision? I mean, you can't, don't just take the criticism like at face value. Like take a look at vision, take a look at what it is that we're doing and where we're headed. If it helps me get there, let's use it. If it doesn't, it's not worth anything.
One of the big challenges for a lot of leaders is responding to that criticism in a way that amplifies their leadership rather than poking at their insecurities.
Sure.
It's a fine line. We need the criticism because constructive criticism helps us get better.
Yeah.
But there is a line. So what are the practical ways that leaders can respond with grace and with humility when they are facing criticism?
Probably the most effective practical thing that you can do when it comes to criticism is to pause, to just take a moment. Maybe you take a day, take as much time as you need in order to respond effectively and graciously. You want to metabolize that criticism. Again, depending on who's giving that criticism, kind of amplifies that information. Now, you're going to react the way that you want to react, but it's a different response when you take a moment to pause. I mean, I just filled out the disc for something else again, and it was a different version. It wasn't the Wiley one that we used, but it was a different one. And so I filled it out. And one of the things on there was like, I'm pretty decisive. I'm high D. Let's go. And so I realized this about my leadership. I like to move fast. And so like taking the time, pressing that pause button to really reflect and evaluate, talk to people that I need to talk to. If you are facing any kind of criticism, and if you want to learn how to respond to it, press the pause button and just take your time.
I tell people all the time is you don't have to respond in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Conversation is still going to be there. You should always mean what you say, but you don't always have to say what you mean. It only takes one or two conversations to hurt a relationship that we have, and then it just puts you in the hole.
Right. And this is coming from two pretty impatient people, meaning you and I. Like, we like to let's go. And so I mean, from, just from past lessons and just from learning it. I mean, I'm still honestly learning this lesson. Pressing the pause button, metabolizing that criticism, thinking through it, reflecting, it'll just help.
So self-reflection is a key skill for handling criticism. What practices would you recommend for leaders to develop strong self-reflection habits?
This thing comes up in every episode that we do.
I'm ready for it.
Journal. Write it down. Write it down in such a way that you can go back to reflect on it, Talk to a coach, talk to a mentor. These are all the things that you do when you hit that pause button. Reflect on the criticism. Ask, was it helpful? Was it hurtful? And when you figure that out, then ask why. Why was it hurtful? How is it helpful? Yeah, but journaling and writing it down, we need to do a lesson on the importance of journaling. Like we pretty much bring it up in every leadership lesson that we talk about because it's just so key and so much a part of leadership to write down your thoughts.
Not enough people journal, and not enough people who journal enough. And sometimes I put myself in that category. How can leaders discern between constructive criticism and just the white noise?
Yeah. Well, I think you phrased it in the question that you asked. Is it constructive? Like to take a look at the criticism. Does it build you up? Does it help build the vision? Is it constructive? Does it help? If it doesn't help, then it's just noise, even though I do have to say though, the caveat is even if it is noise, someone is communicating something. So they might be hurting. And as the leader, you need to be attentive to that. Like there's a reason why this criticism is coming. And so I don't know that it's ever truly noise because someone is saying something. And again, back to some previous things, if you got someone that's just negative and isn't moving the organization forward in the vision, then they might either be in the wrong seat on the bus, or they may need to get kicked off of the bus.
There really is a time to remove somebody from the team. And I get that question all the time. Mo, you talk about everything rises and falls on leadership, and it's always your fault. I learned from Jocko Willink, which is there's no bad teams, there's only bad leaders. At some point, if the entire team is going in one direction and somebody isn't getting on the bus, then it's time to go, right?
Right. It's an issue of fit. Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, let's talk about team dynamic.
Sure.
Leaders set the tone, right? And so the way that a leader receives feedback is going to be the way that his or her team receives feedback. Meaning, if a leader can take criticism, then their people are more likely to be able to do the same. So how can leaders create a culture where feedback is valued and it's used constructively rather than feared?
Yeah. So here's another guy that we keep bringing up in all of these conversations. Lencioni says that you need trust. And in his book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, like that first layer, that base layer is that layer of trust. You need to develop trust within the team, and you need to create that culture built on that trust. So leaders need to create that feedback loop where they can also receive feedback as well as give feedback. And that's part of this trust dynamic. And so when you read through that book, you realize that trust is such a big part of culture and creating that culture where people can give feedback freely and without any kind of punishment, when they're given feedback.
Sometimes I don't want to give feedback. In fact, one of my favorite things to tell people is the only way that I'm really going to give you my criticism is if you're on my team or if you're paying for my time. Because nobody wants criticism. That's why so many celebrities, I think, end up doing dumb things, because you get to a point
they
where
surround themselves.
Yeah, you don't want people to tell you no. It's like, hey, should I jump off this building? Absolutely. Should I set this chair on fire at a restaurant? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
But for leaders, we can't do that. We have to accept criticism. So for our leaders listening today, they're struggling with criticism. They're struggling with taking feedback. What's one piece of advice that you would give them so they could start seeing criticism as a leadership advantage rather than a leadership burden?
I would say practice receiving criticism. I think this is where a coach or a mentor comes in handy, where you can sit with someone that you trust. If you were my coach, like, coach, help me, like, give me some criticism and let me practice receiving criticism. And the more you practice it, the better you get at receiving it. And then the less power it has, I think, when you're practicing receiving criticism. I mean, it's just such a weird thing. We don't really practice receiving criticism. I do this exercise with my team. In fact, like, I just did a podcast with one of my former students, and he goes, yeah, you made us stand across from each other, and the other person like gave us criticism, like 10 things, and we had just to sit there and say thank you. And I totally forgot that I had created that exercise. But the reason why I did that was to practice hearing criticism. And so when you hear it in a safe kind of context where, it doesn't really mean much because you're just practicing, the feelings can come up and you can like start to, experience that that criticism and however your body responds to it. And I mean, it's just such a weird thing, but I think we can practice it and get better at that skill.
How do you choose who gives you criticism? You just don't want to go to some random person.
Right. No, go to a coach.
How do you choose that person or those people?
Yeah, it's somebody that you look up to, somebody that you trust. Remember, trust is kind of a foundational layer for building a culture where you can, experience feedback. So find somebody that you trust and just go to them and say, look, I need to practice receiving criticism. So you can even give them the things or have them come up with it, and then just pay attention to it. The other thing that I practice, that I teach in my class, is to say no. Like, it's the same exercise. You sit across from somebody and they say all kinds of things or ask you all kinds of things, and the answer to every single one of those things is no. And we don't practice saying no, so we're not good at it. And so, I mean, it's all kind of within the same vein, but like, have somebody that you trust help you develop that skill.
Learning how to say no is one of the best lessons that I ever learned years ago. For leaders, we want to help our people, and when we say no, we feel like we are not serving them well, when in fact we guard our own time and create those boundaries. It makes us better leaders.
Yeah.
A practice that I adopted was when somebody asks me something, I need to first say no in my head and then give myself a reason why I should be doing that thing.
But that comes with practice, right? Someone had to teach it to you, and then you had to practice that skill. And so, yeah, I love our conversations around the practice of leadership. These are all things that we can practice to become better at and grow in our leadership.
So before we go, regarding leadership lesson 26, what are your final thoughts?
We're all in process. We're all growing in leadership, and we can all get better if we practice. And practicing receiving criticism is just one thing that'll help you grow in your leadership.
Just remember, criticism is an inevitable part of leadership, but as we have said in this short commentary, it is very powerful for you in your growth process. If you consider yourself a leader, learn how to take criticism, look for people and seek out their criticism, because trust me, people already know what you do wrong.
Right.
They just don't want to tell you because they know you don't want to know. When you convince people that you actually want that constructive feedback, they'll give it to you. If you like the conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, sign up for our free newsletter. Dr. Lim, I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, if you have any criticisms, please put in the comments. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, man, this will be the first one that gets like 1,000 comments, right? Of all this criticism. But hey, we'll take it.
Bring it.
Yeah. Let's start the discussion. All right. Hey, thanks a lot, Dr. Lim. We'll talk next time.
Thank you.
All right.